React Aria just released a brand new set of headless components. They're currently in alpha, but we're going to take a look at one of them today to build a custom animated switch component styled with Tailwind. Now, if you are eager to see the final code, I've gone ahead and included a link in the description to the final code snippet over on buildui.com. So feel free to grab it, drop it in your app, and customize it to your heart's content. But okay, let's get right to it. We are looking at React Aria Components. And on this home page here, if we click Components, we're going to see all of the goodies that are included in this library. And today we are going to be looking at Switch. Now, there are other headless component libraries that let us build switches like this, but today we're going to build a special one. We're actually going to recreate the switch from iOS. And if you're an iPhone user, you probably know that there's a few details in the switch component in iOS that kind of make it stand out. And there's two that I want to call out right now. First, when you go to toggle a switch, when you press, the control actually grows a little bit. And that's just this nice instant visual feedback that lets you know you're actually interacting with the control that you intend to be interacting with. And second, if you drag your finger off of the switch while you're still pressed down, that little control shrinks back down to its original size. And that lets you know that you've canceled the interaction. And you can actually drag your finger on and off the switch to either initiate or cancel the interaction. So these are two really nice details. If you've watched my channel before, you know how much I love this design principle from Apple, that the device always instantly responds to our feedback, even if we're initiating a gesture or interaction. And this is a great example of that. So this is what we're going to be building today with React Aria. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I've got a page right here with some markup and Tailwind classes and just a p tag with airplane mode. And this is where our switch is going to go. So let's start by replacing this with a switch component from React Aria Components. If we save this, we'll see not much happened. And again, this is because React Aria Components is a headless UI library, which means it has a bunch of behavior tucked inside of it. But when it comes to rendering output and styling that output, that's all up to us. So now we actually need to add some markup and styling to actually render our switch. So let's come here and wrap this in a span. And let's add a div, which will be the actual background of our switch right here. Let's make this width 9, height 6, and we'll give it a background of zinc 600. Okay, so we see our div right here. Let's go ahead and pop open our inspector and just take a look. So right here is our airplane mode label. Here is our rectangle. And if we look above, we're actually going to see a little bit of new markup added from this switch component. So these are headless. We saw it didn't affect the visual output, but sometimes there is a bit of markup added. And we can see here we have a label and we also have a div with a hidden checkbox inside of it. So this is giving us the semantics of what we want. A switch or a toggle actually behave like a checkbox in HTML. And so this affords the browser and other devices kind of some semantics and accessibility features for us. But this is what Aria is giving us. And this label right here, that's kind of wrapping both of our elements, is actually this switch right here. And we can go ahead and add classes and other attributes to it. So why don't we come here and add a class name, and we'll make this inline flex so that these two are next to each other. And now we can add a little bit of margin right to the background of our toggle, and we'll go ahead and make this rounded full, just like that. And I'm just going to get rid of this width up here so this is centered. And now that we have the background, we want to add a little knob right here inside of it. So let's open up this div. We'll add another one. And let's make this width 6, height 6, background white. Should give us a square. And if we make this rounded full, now we have our knob. But we want to give this a little breathing room, so let's make these 5 instead. And to center our knob kind of in the background, we could make the parent use flex and use item center, but then we need to nudge this knob over a little bit. A nice little trick for UI elements like this is that instead we could just add a border. And if we actually add a border of 2 pixels, this is going to give us 2 pixels on the top 2 pixels on the bottom, which is 4. 4 pixels is 1 unit in the Tailwind spacing scale. So that gets us from 5 to 6, and that should perfectly center our control inside the background. And now all we need to do is make the border transparent. And now we've got the basis for our switch. So you might be wondering how we actually make this thing toggle from off to on. And there's actually a few ways we can do it. First, Aria does provide us with render props. So if we wanted to, we could render some children right here. And if we destructure the props, we're actually going to see TypeScript autocomplete all of the props that we have that we could use to customize both our classes and any of the markup that we pass in as children to the switch. But there's another way that turns out to be much simpler, more straightforward, given that we're using Tailwind. And if I come over and we find the label, again, this is the element that corresponds to switch. Watch what happens when I hover. Check this out. We've got this new data attribute added for us called data hover true. And when I mouse away, that data attribute disappears. And check out what happens if we go back on and see data hovered, and then I click it. Well, now we have a few more attributes added. We've got hovered is true, we've got focus is true, and we have data selected is true. So these are all of the internal state that Aria is managing inside of Switch that it exposed via render props. It also goes ahead and adds them to the root element as data attributes. And because Tailwind makes styling elements based on their attributes so easy, this turns out to be a much simpler way to style this. So let me show you how this works. If you've used Tailwind before, you're probably familiar with prefixes, right? I can say hover background green 500 on this root element. And if I hover this, we see it all turns green. Now it turns out that Tailwind has a syntax for targeting data attributes, and it looks like this. Data dash, and then we use square brackets to target whatever data attribute we're after. In this case, it's data selected. So if I save this and we turn this off, check that out. Now, whenever I click this and the data selected attribute is present, we get the green class applied. And when it's not there, it goes away. So this is pretty amazing. Tailwind didn't always have these arbitrary variants, the support for arbitrary variants. And since it got the square bracket syntax for arbitrary values, it means we can target any data attribute we want, just like this. But we don't want to target this overall switch, right? We don't want to turn the whole thing green. We actually want to turn just this background green 500, whenever the switch is on. But the problem is that this element right here that we need to turn green, we'll see it doesn't get these data selectors. So I can turn this on and off, and these data attributes only apply to the root. So how can we solve this? Well, fortunately, Tailwind has our back here as well. You might be familiar with the group utility from Tailwind. This is going to do exactly what we want because it lets us style child elements based on the state of parents. So I could do something like group-hover background green 500. And whenever I hover the parent, look at that. Now the child is getting that green background. But we don't want to change the background to green when the parent is hovered. We want to change it when the parent has a data attribute of selected on it. And now, if I click, check that out. The background goes to zinc, but if I click again, we get data selected true up here on the label, and the background goes to green. So pretty cool, pretty nice combo, and hopefully you can see this is pretty pleasant, pretty fast to work with compared to adding a bunch of render props and conditional class lists. So I really like this approach to this problem. And now we can go ahead and do the same thing for our toggle. To actually move the toggle to the right, we can just use some margin left. If I were to put margin left 1 here, we'll see it kind of nudges it a little bit. 2, 3, and 3 does the trick again because we've got 3 here, 5 here, that makes 8. The width is 9, and then we have this 2 pixel border right here. So let's do the same thing. And we want the margin left to be 3 when the group has a data selected attribute on it. And now, check this out. We just made a little toggle. Let's go ahead and transition this background color. Now we can see the green is kind of fading. We'll slap a transition on here, but this is actually not going to work because by default, this transition class, we'll see it only applies to this list of properties. Fortunately, there is a transition all utility included in Tailwind. And look at that. Pretty easy, right? Isn't that cool? Super fast, super easy with Tailwind. Let's go ahead and bring the duration down a little bit. I'm just going to slow this down to duration 300. Make it a little slower. And let's also add a little bit of a shadow to the knob. Just a small detail, but I think it looks nice. Okay, now that we have the mouse interaction working, let's go ahead and style the state when we focus the input with our keyboard. So one of the cool things that comes with Aria Switch is keyboard support. And if I hit space, you'll see that I'm actually focused on the switch and I can toggle it with space, which again is semantically what you would want from an element like this or a checkbox. The browser provides that out of the box for you. Aria standardizes it across devices and browsers. So this is great, but we can't actually tell that we're focused on this input right now. Usually the way that we style focused inputs with Tailwind is using the ring utility. So if I were to drop a ring, we're going to see this nice little glow right here. And we can go ahead and do ring offset 2. That's going to push it out a little bit. And if we color the offset to Zinc 900, which is our background, that's how we kind of get this effect that it looks like it's floating away from it. It's kind of offset. Let's go ahead and bring this ring from the default down to 2 to make it a little bit smaller. And yeah, I think that looks nice. And we only want to apply this ring when it's focused with the keyboard. So usually you would do something like this in Tailwind. You would use the focus prefix to target the focus CSS pseudo state. But if we save this and come back to our switch, we're going to see that we're selected on it right now, but our ring styling is not taking effect. And this is actually another goodie from React Aria. And the reason React Aria doesn't use the CSS focus pseudo state is again because it behaves inconsistently across browsers and devices. If you've used the React Aria hooks before, like use focus and use press, those lower level primitives that these higher level components are actually built on, you'll know that they provide you with their own versions of focus states to help you style them more consistently. So if we pop open the inspector right now and take a look at this, check this out. Here's the label, which again is our switch. And if I focus it with a keyboard, we're going to see data focused is true and data focus visible is true. So we can do exactly the same thing. We want to target a parent state of data focused true and use that to apply this ring. So we can change this to group data, and then we'll put this as focused since that is the name of the attribute over here, just like that. And if I save this, now look at that. I can actually focus it. We see our ring. We know we have focus. We can hit space. We go off and it's not focused anymore. But check this out. If I click this, we're also going to see that focus state. And I don't know about you, but I always hate when controls show keyboard focus states when you interact with them with the mouse. You know, focus states are basically designed for keyboard users. And we already have a pointer device. If we're using a mouse, we know where we're pointing. We don't need to know that this element is focused. So this really kind of breaks the design. And it's actually why this other state called focus visible was introduced. This is another CSS pseudo state that was introduced to kind of the DOM and the web standards. But again, there's many articles on the React Aria site. It doesn't currently behave consistently across browsers and devices. And so you can't use the CSS pseudo state, but fortunately for us, because this switch is built with React Aria use press, we get this data focus visible attribute as well. So if we just change this from data focused to data focus visible. Now look at this. If I click this, it works great. We don't see the ring, but if I tab to it, now we know we have focus with the keyboard. So I really love that they include this. It makes it super easy to cover all these bases. And we're in a pretty good spot right now to move to the final piece, which is to actually grow the knob when we start pressing on it and shrink it if we stop pressing on it. So let's zoom in and think about how we want to do this. Well, the knob is width 5. If we were to make this width 6, look at that. It kind of grows a little bit. It transitions because we got the transition class. So all we really need to do is grow it when we start pressing this. Well, let's pop open the inspector and take a look at these data attributes. And check this out. I'm going to press this. And if you look in the DOM, we're going to see data pressed is true. This is another state managed by React Aria. It's more reliable and consistent than mouse down and mouse up, or pointer down and pointer up. And if you look at this, it says data pressed true. I'm still holding down on my thumb. If I drag off the control, data pressed true goes away. And if I drag on, it comes back. So it's going to work perfectly for us to style this in this kind of intermediate state, and it works both with mouse and touch devices. So let's come here and say group data pressed. Let's go ahead and make the width 6. And now look at that. So easy. Let go, goes to the right. That looks good. Now, when we click it over here, we do want it to grow, but we're going to need it to nudge left a little bit to account for the extra width. And right now, when we're selected, we move it left 3. If we were to make this 2 and grow this, then that's going to be in the correct spot. So let's go ahead and put this back to 3 when we're selected. And we really want to override this to be ML2 when we're both selected in this selected state and when the user is pressing, right? So the cool thing about these arbitrary variants is that we can actually stack them. So let's go ahead and say group data selected, colon, group data pressed. And for this, we want this to be just ML2. And let's see what happens. Boom. Boom, just like that. Pretty neat, right? So you tap it, it works just like you'd expect. Man, that looks good. You click and hold. Gives you a little bit of an indication that you are initiating the toggle. If you let go out here, it stays in the original spot. If you let go in there, it toggles. So those are all the interactions. They work great with every device. Let's go ahead and try it with the keyboard. I can tab to it. I can initiate a toggle by holding spacebar. If I let go, the toggle works. If I press spacebar here, it works. And check this out. I can hold space to initiate a toggle and then hit tab to blur the control, let go of space, and it cancels the toggle. I mean, how cool is this? You get feedback every step of the way. It works with the keyboard, it works with the mouse, and it works with your pointer on a touch device like the iPhone or iPad. I just think this is so cool, and I love that we didn't have to bring in any other libraries other than Tailwind and React Aria Components here. And this is so easy to change too. If you want to make this bigger or smaller, change the animation or how big or small this gets. It's just so much fun and so easy to do. And React Aria is taking care of all the gnarly parts inside of this nice little switch component. Now, before we wrap up, you might be wondering, how the heck do I use this switch? You know, there's no React state or anything going on here. Well, let's come up here and grab some state. We'll call this airplane mode. We'll set it to false and import use state. Let's come down to our switch and we will set is selected to airplane mode and on change to set airplane mode. And now let's go ahead and say airplane mode. If airplane mode is true, we'll say it's on. Otherwise, it's off. And if I come over here and give this a shot, check that out. Let's get rid of this item center right here. Add a little bit more padding. And now you see how easy this is to get state into this switch and basically turn it into a controlled component. So now you can do whatever you want with this, and everything works great. So there you have it, a first look at React Aria Components. Again, check a link in the description for the final code snippet over on buildui.com. And speaking of BuildUI, you might have heard that that's my new website where I'm posting some premium videos and courses. We actually just switched over the pricing model for those premium courses from what used to be a subscription to a single lifetime membership. And so at the time of this video, you can buy a lifetime membership to BuildUI for $149. It's our early bird pricing, and it will get you our complete course on Frame Motion. It'll get you my course on Remix and Tailwind, and also every course we will ever make going forward. And we have so many ideas. I've got so much content I want to make for the site. And so if you had looked at that before and that subscription kind of turned you off, who wants another subscription? Really, nobody does. So we turn on lifetimes. People seem to like it. Go ahead and check that out if you want to support the channel or any of that content interests you. Otherwise, as always, if you have any questions about what I just talked about, leave a comment below. I like to read all of those comments. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.